Thanks very much, Phil, and thanks everyone for joining today. What I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes sharing some thoughts with you about or providing a bit more background to the work that we've done, the findings that have emerged from the work, and hence the recommendations that we've made on the basis of our engagement with a broad spectrum of stakeholders that, as Phil has mentioned. So I could move to the next slide, please. So as Phil mentioned, we've sought to engage with the community that it's interested in smart local energy systems, with a particular focus on local authorities and investors. And what we tried to do was to understand the challenges that they're facing, the approaches that they're following currently, and also to explore and try to reveal opportunities for all parties as we move toward a net zero future. So some of the things that we tried to learn, some of the objectives that we were pursuing as we advanced the work. We wanted to understand what the investor appetite was for SLES projects, and indeed what the awareness was of SLES projects, because we have to acknowledge that they are an emerging concept in the net zero landscape. We wanted to gain better insight into what the investor perspectives would be on opportunities that could emerge from these types of projects. And in addition to that, we wanted to identify what needs the investors have for actually working with local authorities together in collaboration to move these programs forward. And finally, we wanted to gain insight and understand the needs of the local authority finance and energy teams for undertaking these types of projects, and understand more about what opportunities they saw for their areas and for their citizens. So our approach to doing this was to undertake a series of structured interviews and a series of workshops with stakeholders across a range of local authorities and investors, and not only to learn, but also to validate by engaging with that group over a period of time. And on the next slide, just to give you some indication of the range of local authorities and the range of investors we spoke with. We spoke with 17 local authorities, LEPs and energy hubs, and some associated organizations as indicated here. And in engagement, we sought from the communities of local authorities and from the investor communities, which are suggested on the right of the slide. We looked for organizations with a range of sizes. In the local authorities, we looked for a diverse set of types of local authority. We looked for a range of expertise in terms of energy projects. We looked for a range of risk and appetite for innovation, and also underpinning that, understanding the different approaches that could be being pursued as we seek to achieve net zero by the various groups, and secondly, the range of progress that they've made in terms of achieving net zero, or how far along the journey that there had been progress. And on the next slide, we'll illustrate some of the common themes that came from our discussions and conversations with these groups. On the local authority side, it was clear that they weren't following a consistent approach to planning for net zero. It was difficult to monitor and benchmark the progress that they were making in the initiatives that they were pursuing. There was a wide variation in terms of the risk and the risk appetite, the role of innovation in the planning and in the projects that were being undertaken. From a funding point of view, there was a reliance on grant and subsidy funding, and there was clearly a need for skills building from the perspective of capacity, as well as literacy, if you like. The literacy being measured in terms of the requirement not only to understand technology, but also commercial and regulatory and carbon issues in order to create compelling cases for action. On the investor side, there was a different set of feedback. There was perception of the need for or slices comprising complex business models. It wasn't quite clear how you got value from them. It was not clear how individual or bespoke business models translated into wider market value. There was concern about the capabilities for local authorities to deliver these types of programs. And there were questions about scalability. How do you aggregate or build portfolios of opportunities which would make investment much more attractive? So this is intended just to give a bit of a snapshot. The report does go into significantly more detail on these questions. With that, and with the synthesis and study and analysis that we did, we formed a set of 6 recommendations, which are shown on the next slide, and these represent the primary, I suppose, if you like, the primary output from the work, and certainly are intended to lead us to further action. So the first of these broadly relates to the fact that smart local energy systems are an emerging concept, and there is variable awareness of what they are and the opportunities that they create, the value that they can deliver to communities and to investors. Our second, so our first recommendation is that we need to focus attention on generating awareness of what these opportunities actually are. Our second points to the need for local authorities to be given the power and capability to drive decarbonization. So they need to be given a mandate to pursue net zero at a local level. Our third relates to the standardization of net zero planning framework, and this is I suppose seeks to provide confidence and guidance to enable local authorities to develop local energy plans and hence projects in a consistent way. Our fourth recommendation focuses more on the finance mechanisms and the development of innovative finance mechanisms to enable parties to be brought together that would allow public funds and private investment to be brought together to deliver the types of projects and hence outcomes that are being sought. The fifth recommendation is about the demonstration of a visible pipeline of credible projects and making that visible to investors. And our last recommendation talks about the whole question of procurement and how do you get a flexible, suitable standard procurement framework available to enable these projects to progress. Now, in the short time that I've got available, on the next slide, I'm going to highlight three of the recommendations and just say a few more comments on those 3. So if I could move to the next slide, please. So focusing in on recommendation 3, which is relates to the creation of a standardized net zero planning framework. Broadly speaking, the reason that you would want to do this is, first of all, to give local authorities confidence that the approach that they're taking will deliver the right kinds of outcomes for their area, not acknowledging the fact that their area has its own infrastructure, its own aspirations, its own desires from the perspective of the people that live there. So local areas have their own characteristics, attributes, and ambitions. So that framework will enable them to respond to those, but will also open up clarity for investors to understand how to invest in the projects that emerge from the planning activity. So as it says there, the local authorities each have their own interpretations of how they want to progress, what powers they feel they have available to them, and translating their current strategies into project delivery. What the standardized framework would allow is that to be made consistent so that investors can better understand what opportunities are going to be available to them. On the next slide, a few more comments on our fourth recommendation, which was around the question of how to develop more innovative finance mechanisms. And the point here that we discovered in our study was that the funding available to local authorities for these projects tends to be sporadic and short term. And the idea here is that we need to find better ways to bring together public investment, public funding, private sector investment to enable local authorities to move forward. And I think the reference here to a number of different mechanisms that exist today, they need to be supplemented and complemented by collaborative working with the private sector to help move some of these projects forward. There's definitely room for innovative thinking in this regard. On the next slide, I'll make just a few more comments on recommendation 5, which is demonstrating that there is a visible pipeline of credible local energy projects and making that pipeline visible to investors. And this is centered on the idea of how do you demonstrate the size of the investment opportunity and making it large enough to be attractive. And underpinning this, of course, is the need for local authorities, or the opportunity for local authorities to collaborate with each other to help build and aggregate these pipelines. And this seeks to respond not only to the way that the local authorities make decisions about projects, but also to give investors not only visibility but comfort around the credibility of the projects and the scale, so that they feel they're able to address considerations of minimum investments and these kinds of things.